That's all good.
Yeah, so we are recording. I appreciate you guys, and I'm gonna try and process that into an audio and then make it available for people. Link it on the Discord channel, etc. And so I also have a new website to support this club and the Leverage WordPress brand that I'm starting to build for trainings and stuff. It's at leveragewp.co. So I'll probably post the
Excellent.
recording
I just
there.
want to say that excellent. I just want to say that I have actually watched your YouTube video, which I think I actually made a comment on.
Thank
Your
you,
first
Alex.
one on the different formats for email marketing, or the different types of email, if I remember correctly. It was very, very good.
I appreciate that, Alex. Thanks. Yeah, that's new. Only 2 videos up so far, but I'm trying to get some content out there every week. And I'm starting with just a little series on email for WordPress, the different types of email, from marketing email all the way to regular traditional send and receive emails. So thanks for that, Alex. I appreciate you. Again, the
Excellent.
YouTube channel as well is called Leverage WordPress. And so, yeah, I appreciate you guys. And, speed and performance. I am excited for the room today. This is a topic that we've come back to in some of our discussions, because it's kind of one of the foundations of a well-designed website, right? Is that it doesn't take 10 seconds to open for somebody's browser. And so I'm excited to discuss all the factors that come into that in our call today.
I just want to ask you the first thing I was going to say, if it's okay. What do we believe is an acceptable time for a page to load, for two reasons? I'm going to say one for the consumer or the user, and another one for Google in terms of their page speed optimization. What do you guys think?
Ooh, that's a good one. Nice first question for the panel. The first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question, how fast should a page load? And you're right to think, they're parallel goals. Google and SEO, has speed as a ranking factor now, as we all know. But for the user, the first thing that comes to my mind is sub 1 second for at least the relevant content, and this is something I'm sure we'll get into as we go into detail here on the call. But for now it's I'm having a mind blank on the name of what am I thinking of here? Top of the, not above the fold. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I say above the fold, or can I say another way of describing it? Above the fold content or critical content.
Thank you. Critical.
Saying it as well.
Critical content. So sub 1 second, less than a second. Give me a 3-digit milliseconds number in Google Page Insights, and I'm loving that. So my first impression is I'd love to have every website page open in less than a second for the user and for Google. What do you think,
Andrea?
Oh, I don't feel the need for it to be like lightning. I know that if I don't see anything happening, but I'm not sort of this sub ones. I mean, I can look away and rest my eyes for a second. I guess I don't really get, too wound up if someone's site takes a little longer to load. If I want to get there, I want to see progress. But yeah, and a lot of it has to do with your hosting and your image and what's the first thing, and you talk about critical information. Well, really, you're loading a page from the top, so you're always hopefully the critical stuff is at the top, right? So I'm not quite sure on that concept of the critical stuff, because a page always loads from the top mostly. I mean, I don't know. So I don't know. I don't need it to be there lightning speed. I like to see it get there, but I'm certainly not into waiting 10 seconds or something. So maybe I'm just more forgiving. But I mean, I like my site to load fast, and images and hosting make a big difference.
Yeah. I'll just add to, hi Samuel, how are you doing? So welcome Samuel to the stage. I think personally, we're just discussing, the first question is what's acceptable for a page load, and we're talking about, if you like, the top or the fold content, or I call it critical content, and then obviously the rest of the page. I think the important thing here is, right as you said, Andrea, is that someone should know something's happening quickly. And I believe that we should deal with something called, we can talk about it later, something called a waterfall, where we prioritize, and this is the important thing, the above the fold content on a page to load, as Greg said, within that second, right? It's not even that the whole of the content loads if there's images, but that the user sees at least a title, or it would be like, if it's a first page of a website, a hero area title, so they know that they're on the right place and they don't mind waiting for the rest of the content to load. And I think that, for me, is the first point. It's when critical or above the fold content to load as instantly as possible within a second. I think that is a good benchmark. Samuel, what do you think?
Sorry, I was like in a call just now and I just jumped in. Yeah, for me, like, uh, it's good to have like a content delivery network, and it's good to have like a caching system, like a plugin that helps with delivering your website. I think like we should have to all like the beginner like WordPress should be aware on like putting too much slider in their website, because that's like also take a lot of time to like optimize. Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm done speaking.
Sure, Sam, absolutely. And let's get into some of the details of what can help us, or what we should look at in order to optimize a site loading fast for the user. But 100% agreed, Andrea. Like you said, there are things that can be deferred, right? And that's when Alex was responding to your comment, Andrea, about there's lots of factors that go into it, and lots of things that can be loaded on the page potentially after the critical things. And when we talk about critical CSS and then deferring other items, Samuel mentioned kind of an old style, having a slider or hero imagery. Oftentimes, what people desire for a website to have is, gorgeous imagery, potentially video, large, full width sliders at the very top of the page. And as web designers, we're conflicted at times where we want that item at the top of the page to load as fast as possible, right? So if there are things like, if there's JavaScript elements or, CSS that is required for either modules or sections of content that are below the fold or below the bottom edge of the browser when the website first loads, those items don't have to load right away for the best user experience, right? They can be, there's something called lazy loading for images, and we can use techniques to defer JavaScript and defer CSS from loading. Even Google Fonts, we can defer those things to load after the critical items. And when we talk about critical items, just for everyone in the room, critical items are those that are going to be visible to the user right away at the top of the page. And so if we can defer everything else to load afterwards, then just changing the order of the way things load can help us a lot. And I agree, those top things, those, presenting the first contentful paint, that is another term for Google SEO, and to judge how long do those first visual items take to load on the page, and then how long does it take for those to look complete to the user, because it doesn't matter if things below don't load as fast. Go ahead.
Something else that, what happens is if you go to a web page and it's not what you expect, you don't have the headline you're expecting or the thing that you're going there for. So you can even, make sure that the first things that come up make sense to the visitor. Because when you get to something, you open a door and you go, oh, I'm looking for the bathroom and it's a closet. Like, that's not right. So you also want to pay attention to what is that first thing that loads, so people know they're in the right place, and then we'll wait for the rest. Like, sometimes you'll get to a page and you'll go, oh, is this what I wanted? And then people leave. So you can really help your bounce rate by having that stuff at the top be really informative. Like, I'm in the right place. Now I can start to scroll.
Can I just add something to that as well? I'll just say a couple of, if that's all right. Yeah, as I said, I think that's entirely right, Andrea, and I think that's the most important thing. Is when the other way of looking at this as well, if everyone's heard of something called Google Analytics, just for those that don't do a lot of stuff, what we look for on a website, we want to make sure that something called the bounce rate, and what we mean by a bounce rate is someone comes to a page, they don't like what they're looking at, and they bounce straight off. Yeah. So what we're trying to do on a website generally is trying to get the bounce rate to be as low as possible, which means when someone comes to a web page, they love what they're looking at and they don't mind, and they want to look around at other pages. So exactly as Andrea said, that first title is the most important thing. I will put a mention about this with WordPress just in case someone actually knows, and we will get into elements. In terms of images, though, WordPress has put a few features in recently that do make images more efficient. And I will mention quickly what they are. I know we're going to get into the subject, but it's worth mentioning this. The first thing is something called lazy load, right? Lazy loading is when the images only load when they get into the window, which means that it should load the images that are above the fold first, and then as you scroll down, they're loaded, rather than all the images loading at once. And the other thing is another format which WordPress now supports as native, which is called WebP, which would make all the images more compressed. The only thing is, though, if you have existing images on the website that are JPEGs, it won't compress those. It's only that you can upload WebP images, but WebP is the smallest file format for images. I just want to mention those 2 points. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Can I add also? So, in my experience, I think like for a website, depending on your website, but if your website is like heavily image kind of focus or heavily like uh, video kind of focus, right? So they like the quality of like the web piece sometimes is not really nice or not like really the same quality as like the PNGs or sometimes. So what you need to do is if you can also like do like a preloader. So like for like my clients, I like the one who have like a lot of like images, a lot of like slider, a lot of like things going on. I always like put a preloader. So there's like this fun little gimmick like preloader that like helps people to like, oh wow, there's like an animation on it, makes people like stays. So yeah, I'm Sam, I'm done speaking.
Yeah, that's interesting, Sam. I'd love everyone's thoughts on when you say preloader, that's really kind of parallel to the idea of lazy loading, right? Where it's they're not the same thing, but lazy loading images, which Alex stated is now included in the WordPress core software, is something you can enable where the images don't load until they're just about to be scrolled into the viewport window for the user, right? And then, as Sam mentioned, you can install a preloader, which when items are loading on the page, the website detects that items are not quite loaded yet, and then it displays you an animated, kind of the spinning beach ball or any kind of animation that really informs the user, hey, there's stuff to be loaded in the background here, so hold on a quick sec. What are you guys' opinion on how on those things?
I understood that preloading is you're actually loading a low res in picture that looks, you go to a site and it's kind of fuzzy and then the picture comes in. So I actually understood it to be more like the image is there in the preloading of the source set of these images and it's low res and then it flushes in is sort of what I understood that preloading to be. But
Well,
something
there's
else
a couple of
about,
no, sorry, go on, carry on.
no, you finish, you go.
I was going to say, well, generally, if you want to look at an example, probably one of the better examples of this, go and look at the BBC website. So what the BBC website, they do a preloader, which is a box to show where the image is going to be with the BBC logo in it, and then the image loads. So that's generally what a preloader means, that you're showing the user the space that the image will then fill. I think Facebook also do it as well, because Facebook can take ages to load a page with all that content. So the preload isn't actually the image. The preload is a block where the image is actually going to go. That's what I believe that they do on the BBC stuff. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, because some sites they don't even load anything until you actually scroll down. So it kind of holds that. It holds you putting anything, even placeholders. So it depends on how they're setting it up to run that.
Yeah, as I know I'm a Divi fan, and so one of the things that Divi's doing now is this conditional rendering. So so a long or complex page isn't going to affect the speed because it's going to load the same time as a short page because it's called conditional rendering, because you don't need the data that's down the page. And so if you have these long complex pages, they don't take any longer to load.
Yeah, it's true, Andrea. Thanks for bringing that up. And I'm sure we'll go into a little bit more detail about that specifically in the Divi performance enhancements. But I think we're really kind of we're dancing around the same topic here. It's a great place to start for speed and performance, optimizing your content so that there's nothing that really holds up the user experience. And from an animation circular item to a logo placeholder where the image is supposed to be, to a lower res version, like a pixelated version of the image as a placeholder. All those are kind of the same thing. We're improving the user experience by at least showing them something, right?
Yeah. Could I also caveat that as well then? So another big factor now, which has been around for quite a while, I'm not going to quote numbers of when it was available, but let's say it's been available. You can install a plugin called Svg Safe, and there's quite a few Svg plugins. And ideally, what you want to do on a website now, we used to originally do logos, I suppose, in the first days as GIFs. Then we changed to PNGs to have transparency. And now, for quite a while, we should be supporting Svg for icons, definitely. And the new format from that as well is also, I'm going to mispronounce this because I'm completely dyslexic, Lili, it's the animated SVGs as well, which is also becoming quite popular. I don't know if someone wants to comment on what the actual right spelling is, but the point I'm trying to explain to you is that for size, definitely SVGs is better for logos and for icons. And for the animation, I think it's called Lili. Does someone want to comment on that? Because I think I've got the name misspelled because I'm dyslexic, so I always spell names incorrectly. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Oh, sorry for the delay, guys. I was all in the back channel away from the front trying to click around. Thanks for that reminder, Alex. I've made you guys mods so that you can invite more people to the room. We'd love to have more people come and join us. But yeah, SVG, another file format that is enlargeable, a vector. It's a vector style format. So you can make icons and logos larger without deteriorating the quality at all. And so that's an appropriate image format for items that are not bitmap style or photographs, but for graphics and that type of thing. Great point, Alex. But I missed what you were talking about as far as what word were you about the spelling?
So so I'll get the right thing. It's called Elite files. So what they are is they are animated SVG files. So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, which, exactly as you said, means that it doesn't pixelate, and it's a mathematical calculation. And elites are based on that, which is animated. So they're animated SVGs. I know definitely it's supported as natively in Elementor, supports the native file. I'm not sure whether Divi also does as well. But if you need to put animation on the site, in the old days we used to use animated GIFs, or I suppose you could put video on, but you can now make a very, very small animated file with a Lili. And what I'll do is that I'll get the website up, and then I'll put it in the Discord channel if anyone wants to see it. And in there, they've got examples of stuff you can use on the website. So I was on a website recently, and when you sign up, they've got an animation of fireworks for like, congratulations for signing up. But the animation didn't take any size because it was done as the Elite file, which I'm explaining, which is like a animated SVG file. Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm done speaking.
And can you spell that for everyone, Alex?
Yeah, I'm going to. Let me just get it. It's. I will do in a second. I'm just going to get it up. I'll let Greg carry on, and then I'll tell you when I put it up on the site. All right.
Thanks for that, Alex. Yeah, I'm curious about the name of that too, Charlene. And I am taking notes in the Discord channel. By the way, I should probably just reset the room here quickly and just welcome everyone and mention our Discord channel where some of us will usually take some notes and post links where we can share things like that. But before I do that, just very quickly, I didn't want this idea to leave my head as Alex was speaking about the animated SVG files. And he talked about we used to use animated GIFs or GIFs, and being a Divi user, there's Elementor, I'm sure as well. There's a lot of powerful animations and either hover or scroll animations that we can use in our designs that are very powerful and most often powered by CSS code. So that makes it a lot smaller as far as instead of loading, an animated video file or an animated GIF. And if you can't use, you can basically take any element, not just an SVG file like a logo or an icon, and you can animate it on scroll, like you see things slide in from the left or fade in as you scroll. And it's just nice features that these days can be done pretty fast with high performance using CSS animation. And so I just wanted to note that.
Yeah. So just let you know, you can also do, the name of it is LOTTIE, and I've just put a link in the Leverage WordPress channel. Also, following on from what Greg just mentioned, you said on scroll, you can actually also program that to actually work on scroll as well. So that means you can actually have an animation working on scroll. Yeah. As a separate Elite file, so they are programmable as well.
Awesome.
It's a very, very exciting thing. Yeah, it's really good. And also the great thing, as the conversation is around speed, the file size of them is minute compared to bigger animated GIFs and bigger video files. And by the way, just one other little point as well: never ever put video on your site. Always host that externally on a media server. Yeah. Anyway, I'll shut up about that. I'm Alex. I'm done speaking.
I think you're talking about the Lottie files. I love those files.
Yeah, he mentioned about Lottie files.
That's it. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Lottie is probably the right name, right way of spelling it or saying it. Anyway, I'm Alex. I'm done speaking.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And yeah, very important quick side note that Alex sort of glossed over as which is, never put video in your WordPress media library and then place it on your site like an image. Definitely use a professional video hosting service like, YouTube or Vimeo or Wistia, something like that, in order to place video on your page. And it's an interesting idea, Alex, too. One last thing I'll mention is that, and this is something that potentially we want to discuss in this speed and performance room. If you're loading something from an external source, like a video or even Google Fonts, then your website is kind of beholden to that server as far as how fast things can load. And that's why you would maybe defer loading for Google Fonts and things like that.
Yeah. But I was going to mention one other point as well. If you're doing the video, and this is I'm going to credit SEO. Who am I going to credit? Who does the SEO rooms? Right.
Is it Noah?
I'll get his name in a minute.
Noah Lerner.
The thing I'm just going to say about this is that what you can also do to make it, like we just mentioned, if you are running video, instead of displaying the video when someone comes to the page, like a YouTube video, you can have your own image on your own website to display, and only when they click, the YouTube video actually displays. That's another way of saving a lot of external loading as well, which is also worth mentioning. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
So yeah, so in the video like tag, you can put there is this element called data-poster, and that you can put it that poster video as a cover images. So once you click on it, so if for example, if you use a services I don't know, Video.js or something like that, you can actually manipulate the video to have poster video first, and then when you click, the video run.
Yeah, that's right. And Noah Lerner, who runs a lot of the SEO rooms, was mentioning that as well. So I'm not going to credit myself for that. I'm going to say Noah Lerner. He does a lot of rooms on SEO on Clubhouse as well. So me and him always talk about stuff to improve the site. I'm Alex, sometimes speaking.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. And welcome, Dee, to the stage. Hello, and thanks for coming on up. I know that I wanted to reset the room and just welcome everyone in the room. We're talking about website speed and performance, especially for WordPress, but in any topic is on the table for us. And if anyone would like to contribute, welcome to come up to the stage, ask a question, or join in the conversation. Welcome. Hello, Dee.
What's going on, kings and queens? This is D Hud, the Entree Motivator out of Atlanta, Georgia. Just loving the topic you all were talking about. That speed, man. Speed is a thing. But myself personally, I use InVideo. It's called InVideo for my video hosting. So YouTube is cool, but I don't want commercials and previews and ads and stuff popping up on my video. But yeah, so I mean, definitely loving the speed. I guess actually have a question. You know, I don't see a lot of WordPress rooms, and you know, I'm Shopify partner, Wix partner, but I always prefer WordPress. My argument is I can build Shopify on WordPress, but my question is, I'm having problems with my server. I have too many files, and I'm pretty well versed, just not in the optimization of servers. Yeah, so I mean, I know I can delete some stuff, but I don't want to delete some vital things.
Okay, so the first thing I'd say around servers is, are we talking about WordPress sites in particular, D?
Yes.
Okay, so where are you hosting at the moment? What's your current hosting?
Well, I have 4 hosters. I mean, four of them. The main one I'm having a problem with is HostGator.
Oh, well, I think the first thing is you're talking, right. So when it comes to hosting, I think I would put different hosting at different levels. HostGator, I would put at the levels of a McDonald's or Lidl. We have Lidl in the UK as well, or Aldi's. They are really they're cheap, but really they're not focused on quality and stuff. So I would definitely say Gator. I would definitely move the hosting away from that. Another reason why Gatehost in particular is they also support adult content, which means that if you're talking about neighborhood of hosting, that's another reason why you may want to look at changing the hosting. If you get better quality hosting, then they have more features, more power, more features. Although you'll pay more money, the quality will be much better. And it's like driving a car, you know. If you have to pay a bit more money, you'll get a much faster car and more reliable. And it's the same thing when it comes to hosting as well. I'm not going to start on who we recommend yet, because I think that's a whole conversation, but definitely Gator Host, I would look to move away from that. And we can give a selection of who we recommend for hosting. Anyone else want to add to that?
Oh yeah, I love that because I've been trying to retire. I've been planning on retiring them real soon. So definitely thank you for the second wave of confirmation.
Yeah, I think you with that one.
Go
because
ahead.
I'm sorry. I think you hit it on the head with that, because a lot of times we always, especially when you're starting out, you're not sure where to host your site. You want to test things out. Then yes, it's good to start someplace where you might feel comfortable, but you never want to build a site that you're really going to start investing your time in and investing your content in if the hosting is not really stepping up and doing what they need to do. And you also want to make sure what you're going to use on there. If you're going to have a lot of large files, you want to make sure you're optimizing them. So even images, PDFs, you want to optimize them even though they're going to be on your hosting provider. You want to make sure that they're not going to take a long time to download when they get to that point, especially if you're going to drive a lot of traffic to it. You also want to make sure that the hosting company will throttle and allow you to have a large spike and allow you to come down without it crashing your website as well.
I would also say as well that so when we're looking at hosting, it also depends also how much traffic you're going to get. But ideally, what we're discussing is more scalable hosting. So there is a few ones that, if you've got the budget for it, would look at. Do you know how much traffic you're getting on the site at the moment, D? That's probably something to look at.
I mean, I think I want that suggestion that you was about to throw out there. I mean, I've been looking into Amazon server, but the main thing is, um, just building a site. I don't really know the kind of
Okay.
traffic that I'm going to have, because it's going to be a multi-site network, and it's going to be a lot of people on it.
Fine. If it's a multi-site network, I would, and the only thing you need to understand about Amazon, which is great, is the difference between managed and unmanaged hosting. Yeah, there are a lot of support on people that can help you with Amazon, but I would I would decide whether you want managed or unmanaged. So Amazon and Google, I'd say actually out of the two, Amazon probably is the more advanced, but both of them are generally unmanaged. Yeah, if you want managed hosting, I would say, and I don't know, I'll just give you a couple you can look at: Flywheel, Cloudways, Kinsta, probably there. Oh, and also I'd say they're probably pretty good ones. I'm actually in discussion with a multi-site at the moment with Kinsta, and they're going to offer me a multi-site using unlimited subdomains, which means I can go client.mywebsite, client2.mywebsite, client3.mywebsite, running through a multi-site. So I think Kinsta is a good solution. Cloudways and Flywheel. I know, Andrew, you like Cloudways, don't you? I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Yeah, I mean, hosting, you go down this hosting thing, and hosting is as different as milk is different. Hosting is not like, there's PHP versions. Does your host update the PHPs? Does the host have caching on their side that clashes with the caching on the the WordPress side? Like, I'm just finding more and more and more that hosting is not, it's completely different between things. And so you're absolutely, I don't like managed hosting myself. I'm a Cloudways fan. It's cheap, it's different, but it's fast. Hosting is not all created equally.
Yeah, I mean, like, it just depends on like how you manage your business, right? So if you are like running a large scale kind of like WordPress agency, right, you probably want to have like some kind of like, AWS, Google, Vulture, I don't know, something that you can manage yourself. Like, you can manage like the database through like, different clusters, and you want to connect it like to, like the IP that you wanted to like point on. I understand that, like, it's just depending on your budget, like how you want to manage stuff. Like there's like a lot of like ways to do it, like with WHM as well, cPanel, manage cPanel. So that's also like one of the thing. It's just like depending on like what your priority are, what is like the client, and then yeah, is it like multi-site or not? I'm Sam, I'm done speaking.
Yeah, if for me, I always make sure that the support is as top notch as possible. I love a 24-hour support if it's either through a chat or I can jump on the phone, because I tend to work a lot in the middle of the night. So for me, I'm up at 2 in the morning and I'm testing things out, or I'm fixing things for clients. That way I know they have low traffic. So I'm not interrupting clients trying to purchase things or anything like that at a mass scale. But I always make sure that whoever I'm dealing with, I try to have actual access to a person, rather than either an automated chat box, or I have to wait 42 hours or whatever, 48 hours or whatever that may be, for someone to respond to an email. So that's also something that I highly consider whenever I deal with a hosting company. And for me, I love A2 hosting to deal with, as I can do my own updates for things. But if I need, if I run into any issues, they're quick to jump on and help assist me. They don't put me through the ringer just to get help on things.
I completely agree with that 100%. I actually use in the UK, I don't know if it's applicable to UD, but I use a company called Guru, and they respond like in 10 minutes to everything manually. So I totally agree with that. But I'm saying that the ones that normally come up and the ones that I'm probably going to use is probably going to be Kinsta or Cloudways, because again, they've got phenomenal customer service, and plus they're scalable. Kinsta is built on the Google Cloud platform, and also and so that means there's a managed support, but also they've got all their own caching thing built into it, so they're really scalable as well. But I think any of those ones that were recommended would be a massive upgrade to where you're at the moment, D, which is the most important thing. I'm Alison, done speak.
Yeah, I just love all the answers, man. It was actually it's not too many WordPress rooms out here, but definitely the perspective. I just learned a few things just listening to the answers, like managed servers, self-managed. I actually prefer self-managed, but as far as the just listening to what you're saying about what the providers actually provide, it's actually a place I purchased a few servers for a lifetime. So for lifetime service, but now that I'm comparing, I guess Hondas to Ferraris, I guess I'm about to get me a new car. But as far as I appreciate that knowledge, because that HostGator, I think I think they're the worst server I have. So just listening and looking at all the things that it may include. Even the new server I just got, it has like 100 WordPress themes. HostGator ain't got nothing in there. But so thank you for all that knowledge and that info. I think like me, I just started using WP Ultimato, something like that. But it turns my site to a SaaS or a website as a service, and that's what I was afraid of, because allowing people to create their own sites within my site, I know it's about to be a big server problem. So appreciate all that knowledge, y'all.
Thanks for all those questions, Dee. This is Greg, and I love all the comments that everyone's had. And yeah, a lot of people can optimize a shared budget server hosting company like HostGator to a point, right? But when you want to grow, you'd want to expand into a service that can support what you're trying to do without struggling or loading slowly. With HostGator, one thing that occurred to me before I'll just kind of summarize the different types of hosting. And thank you, Dee, for appreciating everyone giving their thoughts in the room here. I love it too, and I always learn a lot. As Alex would say, we're always learners here, right? As well as a panel on the stage. But one of the things that I didn't want to forget was that if you are having a site that's giving you resource issues potentially on a smaller server like your HostGator server, one of the things that you might watch out for is that if you have any automated backups happening, like a backup plugin, for example, especially, you may be filling up file size space with extra backups that you don't need. So that can happen on a shared server, a server that has lower amount of space resources on it. So just check that at least for an initial look, because there's resources on each of our hosting servers, not just storage space, but also PHP workers, as Andrea mentioned, RAM memory and CPU. And if you look at your server stats, you can often delve deeper and find out, well, what is it that's holding up the website? It might not be file storage, it might be RAM memory or something like that. And when you look at going into WP Ultimo or WordPress multi-site, like you're talking about, I would definitely recommend going with either self-managed hosting, where you can get your own servers at your own sizes and power that you need. Alex and Andrea were mentioning, Cloudways is a great self-managed where you can choose the size of your own servers and your infrastructure that you use. I use a company called GridPane, which is an excellent self-managed server and hosting program for WordPress, where they have a great software stack that's specifically built for powering WordPress. And then managed WordPress hosting, a little more expensive in general, but basically it's like one-stop shop, and they're taking care of everything on your behalf. And for somebody that doesn't want to deal with maybe optimizing or figuring out what kind of things you can do best, a managed server like Kinsta, Flywheel, WP Engine, those are examples of managed WordPress hosting companies that are quite powerful and optimized for WordPress too. So as a summary, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your question, Dee. It's excellent. And I'd love to welcome Ismail to the stage. I know you've been patiently waiting. Welcome, and how are you? Do you have a question or a comment?
Hey, Greg and Alex and everyone else. Glad to be here. Thanks for bringing me up on stage. My question is around embedding Google Forms or Jot Forms onto a web page, not necessarily the landing page, but maybe one of the support pages. Would that in any way affect the performance or the speed of a site? So yeah, that was my question, and I'm done speaking.
That's a great question, Ismail. And Jotform, along with there's other types of embedded services that you can use. It falls in the category of in order to load your Jotform, that is a form that's an interactive form that the user can use that's hosted externally. And so it's a good question, because when you do embed something on your website that is being loaded from a separate website, Jotform servers, then you're kind of beholden to them for their site speed, And so what I would maybe avoid doing is putting an embedded form like a Jotform at the very top of my main pages. But for what you're saying, you're really Jotform and professional companies that are designed to have embedded forms are really, you've got to rely on them to optimize their own servers, which they'll generally do. But even though you're beholden to them to serve the forms as fast as possible, you're generally, that you're not taking the resources from your own server. You're actually pulling the form from an external server. And so I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but you've kind of got both things going on. On the one hand, you're not using your own server resources, so that doesn't slow down anything else on your site. But on the other hand, you're dependent on Jotform keeping their site or their servers fast. And so I would encourage you to use embeds like that from reputable companies like Jotform and not worry too much about the site loading speed. I just wouldn't put it at the very top of your homepage.
And I also wanted to jump in on that too, because we also have to remember when we're embedding things, we're adding code to our websites. So code also helps to add to load times if you're not optimizing that properly, but you don't also want to over optimize your site, because then you can tend to break it or something else can go wrong. So you just want to be careful and mindful of what it is that you're doing. So if you have a website that maybe you have a form that you can use in the website and just connect through an API, so at least you can still use or send your information elsewhere. Just understand what's the purpose of the form, the embedded form that you're going to use, and can you just utilize what you already have that's on your site.
Or you can use like something like a form plugins to help you embed this form, so you don't need to use like external resources.
I think the advantages of a service like Jotforms, there's so many more advantages to it, that they collate your data. I'm a big fan of Jotforms just because often you have 30 people filling out the form. You can download it as an Excel spreadsheet. Like, there's just so many advantages that I would not be concerned too much with the other things. I mean, I'm not that familiar with other forms, but I just know that Jotforms, I can, any of my clients can, any assistant can go to Jotforms and get the information. So I really like that sort of stuff is off, somewhere else. I had the experience once thinking of putting things on websites. Is I was sharing in my newbie days, I was sharing a graphic, and it was on one client site. So I thought, well, I'll just quickly copy the code. Well, their site got hacked and it took down the other site. So I've always been very cognitive of sharing even documents and other websites, because you want to check those links and make sure things are working. So that's just something that came up when we talked about putting things from other places on your site. This is Andrea, and I'm done.
I would just say, I'll just add to that, and I think that doing external forms is okay if they're reputable sites. I actually think what Greg said is absolutely right. As long as the embed isn't at the top of the page, and you can use a waterfall system to state that you want externals to load later, that means that the page speed shouldn't be affected, because the content's loaded super quickly from your server from the top of the page. I think that was the best comment, I believe. But I think external content's fine. I mean, we all use YouTube and other places. As we said, ideally, what you could also do as well, where the form placeholder is. As long as you could maybe put a box around it saying, please fill out the form, and then it loads. That's also another way to do it as well. So at least the user can see that the form will load into that place. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Thanks for that, Alex. I was just taking some notes in the Discord channel about this stuff, and yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I agree. We do, and we should feel free to use embeds in different ways. And so, just looking at the waterfall, basically the way that your website loads. If you look at gtmetrics.com, for example, is one resource we can use to look at the speed of our websites. And if you go a little bit deeper than just the score, the percent, the score as far as a number, or A, B, C, D, F for how fast your site loads, and click the waterfall, you can see what is loading first, and then what items you can really defer to be loading afterwards. And Andrea had a good point too. When you're looking at using an external embed or using a service and placing it on your website, and this is true of a lot of different tools that we use, there might be a compromise that would be that would be very, very positive. With a few milliseconds of loading time increase, you're getting the benefits of, say, with Jotform, having the data collection and analysis that you might not be able to get from an included form plugin with WordPress, or at least it might take a lot more configuration for you to be able to save and analyze that data and take it out of the form inputs itself. But for me, I do use WordPress form plugins for that, and there are some that do that. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard, Siri just came up.
You're cutting
out. Sorry, I think I pressed Siri by accident, but I guess that's where I was finished with that. I use WordPress plugins for my contact forms, and I like ones that save the data in the database so that I can at least export it and analyze that myself.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I'm similar to you. I've actually got a lifetime license for something called Formidable Forms, but if I didn't, I would definitely be using Gravita Forms, probably the most advanced form system for WordPress. I want to put another point on this as well, which we touched on it, but I don't think we've really mentioned it. The power of caching, right? And remember that it's the size of the page and also the quality of the caching software. So when we say caching, what that means is instead of the page loading again and meaning having to keep connecting to the server, if the page is static and doesn't have a lot of dynamic content would be shopping carts and checkouts, then the page can actually be loaded directly from the cache, right? And there's different levels and different quality of caching software that massively increases the speed of a page load. And also there's something else that we did touch on, which we will be talking about, which is called Cdns, or content delivery networks, which means the content is loaded locally, globally, but caching is very, 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 very important. And I think it should definitely be a subject that's discussed here. I personally like something called Lightspeed because it's built into the server. Another one that comes up a lot is called Cloudflare, which has got a very good caching system in it. And what does anyone else think? I'm Alex, done speaking.
So with this, actually, like, if you're like really like a hardcore speed performances WordPress geek, there is like in WordPress.org, there's an article there. Well, if you wanted to use like Nginx instead of Apache, like with a LAMP stack to like load your website. Of course, like there is like a few kind of like positive and negative of like using like Nginx. And also like for caching, I would love to I use like Redis caching to help me like to cache like the whole thing. So if you wanted to set up Redis, you can just like download the plugin. But the thing is like you need to like be able to like install the Redis from the server itself. So if you do it manually, this definitely help.
Thanks, Sam, for mentioning that. It's a good point, and if we get into caching just a little bit, from my perspective, We all, Alex and Samuel, just mentioned some server-side caching methods, right? Lightspeed or Open Lightspeed, OLS, as it's referred to a lot, and Nginx. And Redis caching are often needing to be configured at your hosting company and at your server. And many of the best hosting companies have their own kind of configured and set up caching systems that work quite well. And one thing I would caution is there's another kind of type of caching where if you're on a cheaper server that isn't offering a robust caching system in the server, there are many caching plugins for WordPress. You know, some of the popular ones, WP Rocket, WP Total Cache is another one. But those are great caching plugins for WordPress. However, if your host is already providing a caching system, it's not a best practice. It's not a good idea to layer on top of that an extra, caching plugin like WP Rocket, unless you don't have that at the server in the first place. And so it's very important that you look at what your server and your hosting company is providing at the server side before you go and try to set up and plug in a bunch of caching plugins or a caching plugin on your site. You really don't want to layer those on top of each other. You want to use a single caching program that's had some thought put into its configuration. And this is Greg, and I'm done speaking. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts about that.
Yes, I have my clients now, if it's not a host that I'm familiar with, I have them ask their host, what do you recommend for caching that works best for your setup? Because again, in my earlier days, you thought hosting was hosting, but it's not. And so I ask them to have the conversation, and then they come back with suggestions that work for their host. Xandria, I'm done.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. And as I say, what I tend to do now is that I look for the caching, and we are going to mention Cdn as well, but caching particularly I think is majorly important. So I think from now on in D, you were talking about your hosting that you're looking at upgrading. I would definitely make a note of asking around what caching they have built in. If caching built into the server is always going to generally outperform just a caching plugin, because that means that it's configured to work with that server and therefore it's optimized for that server. So I'm totally with you guys, but definitely look for the hosting. I think server caching is definitely the way that everyone should try and go if they can. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Yeah, that made me actually, when y'all was talking about caching, made me go look at my servers and like, hold on, which one of these got some caching? But me, I just think about getting these plugins myself and trying to purchase lifetime for unlimited sites as possible. But I love the idea of in the site or out of the site. What you all were just talking about. Because I do have when you were talking about Ishmael, as far as embedding the form, I have Sudash. I embed my forms. But as far as right now, I embed my course platform. But I bought a WP courseware, a WordPress course making program. So I mean, I know that course being built in the site versus the iframe, the iframe embed or whatever of a platform. I just, I'm in the dilemma of it being all in one, but it's just being slower. I think when Greg said that.
Yeah, can I just say a couple of things you can actually do with that? If you're talking about a learning platform, I would say what you could do is, what I'd recommend potentially is splitting up the service. So what you end up doing is that you run the main site as the sales vehicle, e.g. maybe just mainly lead gen and sales. And then what you do is to run the actual LMS, which can take a lot more resources. And the one thing you can do is you can run that on a subdomain and then have that as its own resources. That's a way to do it, is split up the two of them together. And that means that you're not affecting the speed. The main reason is you're not going to affect the speed of the main site, which you want to be super quick for when people come in as the sales part of the site. And it means that you're not affecting that speed. And then you can dedicate resources separately for the subdomain. So my cat, by the way, has decided she wants to play with the radiator as we're talking.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
appreciate that, because I can make the course and make it and give it its own domain.
And give it its own. No, it doesn't need to have its own domain. Sorry, what are you doing? It doesn't need to have its own domain. It just needs to have its own. It can be on a subdomain, so it can still sit on the same hosting package, even if you want it to, but it has its own resources, which then means it won't directly affect the main site. That's one way you can actually do it in order to not affect speed. Yeah, so that's what I do quite a lot of times. So whenever I'm working, I've got my main site that I have its own resources for the sales vehicle, and then if I need to do other operations, I set subdomains with their own hosting packages, and then each resource can be given to each package. Yeah. Also, I think we just want to also mention as well, we touched on it, but I thought we should also talk about it as well, content delivery network. Does someone else want to explain what that is and what that means? I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Sure, Alex. Thanks for bringing that up. This is Greg, and I'd love to talk about CDN. It's a little bit related to caching, and one thing I would mention before I introduce a CDN, just very quickly as we transition from the topic of caching, and what we've gone over it a little bit, but relative to what Dee was talking about, he's talking about some dynamic websites that need to, there are certain pages in either like WooCommerce or e-commerce sites, LMS or courseware, as Deep mentioned it, where the users who are taking the course need to be logged in, and whether they're logged in or not, the page might look different, and therefore there are certain pages within systems like that that cannot be cached. They need to be loaded in real time on the server so that the user gets the appropriate information at the time, for their shopping cart, for their course pages, so they know where they are in the course and what, which videos they didn't see yet and that sort of thing. And so sometimes, LMS sites and e-commerce sites are known to take more server resources in general because there are certain pages and sections of the website that can't be cached, meaning that they can't be pre-made at the server and then just delivered as is, but they do have to be kind of built in the background as soon as the user visits them. But one thing you can also do, as I transition to the topic of a content delivery network, and I know that Alex mentioned the company Cloudflare. Cloudflare does a lot of different things there, but one of the things that Cloudflare, if you use Cloudflare, and they have a great free service, if you use Cloudflare to send traffic through Cloudflare first and then to your website, they do a few things all at once. They provide some page caching, but one of the most important things is that they do provide a content delivery network, even in their free service. And let me define that, as Alex, I'm getting around to it, but thank you, Alex, for that. But for everyone in the room to understand what a CDN is, basically it means that your WordPress website, your website is obviously hosted on a computer somewhere in a data center connected to the internet in a fast way, right? It's actual code that sits there on a computer in a basement with air conditioning, hopefully, right? And so if that data center is located in California, for example, and then somebody over in Europe wants to open your site, you might think, well, okay, they've got to, get the data from that site all the way across the ocean or through a satellite connection. And because they're on the other side of the world, that's going to be slower, and it would be, except that in a content delivery network, what a service that can provide you with a CDN is that they put copies of your website and its pages on different data centers all over the world. And so whoever browses to your website, wherever they're located in the world geographically, they load the site from their closest data center. And that's what a CDN does. It's a network that delivers your content from different places around the world. And combined with caching, it's a really powerful way to have ideal speed and performance for your WordPress site. So this is Greg, and I'm done speaking. I'd love to hear your comments on that.
I think everything you just said is massively important. I just want to just touch on something before we get on to the CDNs anyway, is that the reason why sites like, for example, if we're talking about e-commerce sites, training sites, and also membership sites, I'd say probably the three categories. That's why they need a lot more resources. Also, I definitely would also say what you're planning to do is setting up a multi-site. Those sites need a lot more resources because of what Greg is saying. Because a user has to log in and those pages aren't cached, that means the server is doing more work. And if you times that by 100, 200, 500, 1,000 people trying to work on the site at once, or buying on a site at once, or looking at videos on a site at once in a training course, that's why they need a lot more resources. I mean, we probably should touch on some of that, but what I'd probably say is speak to your hosting company or speak to who you're planning to do. I'll tell them what you're planning to do, and then they should allocate resources or tell you what type of server would be able to run that on their network, because I believe that everyone is slightly different on how they allocate their resources. But that is the big point. If someone has to log into the site and it can't be cached, that uses a lot more resources on the actual server. That's one point. My point about CDNs, I think Cloudflare is a brilliant solution. I will also mention, I believe now Lightspeed has also added CDN as part of their solution. I'm not saying it's perfect, but they have added it. That's my only comment about CDNs. But definitely, if a site's global, you think you've got a global audience, use a CDN. Definitely. I'm not speaking.
Great, thanks for that, Alex. And hey, hello, Mark. I'd love to welcome you up to the stage. If you had I know you've been waiting patiently and listening in, but love to have you here. And do you have a question or want to contribute to the discussion? Hey, Mark.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I do have a question. It goes back to when the room first started, and you were talking about the 1 second page speed time or the 1 second load time for like that main section on the site. And so I started thinking about, and I wanted to get the opinion or the views of the panel. When you all are calculating that, because there are different load speeds depending on, internet speed, connection, and device and all of that, do you look at like the average speed of a mobile user in your target demographic or a desktop user? Like, it seems like that would be important to kind of target who you're actually making it fast for, and vice versa, like who you're not going to make it fast for. So I'm just curious you all's thoughts on that. If that makes sense, let me know if it doesn't.
It makes sense, but usually that's where when you start testing and you're looking at GT metrics and things like that, that's what they're helping you look at. They're helping you look at the mobile response, and they're helping you look at the desktop and stuff like that. So you have more of it's more not really a industry speed of thing that you're looking at first to make sure you're on track. You're just wanting to make sure that, as opposed to all sites that are either the size of your website and things like that, that you're in that type of a category, that you're actually loading according to what that would look like for the size of your website, if that makes sense.
Can I just also comment as well that what I tend to do is that when a site, it depends what you got. I mean, ideally, it depends if one, if a site is brand new. Secondly, if the site is a rebuild of an existing website. So generally, in my discovery, when I'm dealing with the client, if they've already got analytics, there was already a site there. What I tend to do before I build a site is look at audience and technologies, and in there will tell you what the split between mobile, tablet, and desktop is. I've worked on businesses that are aimed at festivals where 95% of all the traffic is mobile. 95% of all the traffic is actually mobile. Yeah, I've dealt with older sites that deal with older people. I've dealt with charities, Help the Aged, which is a massive charity in the UK to do with Eldon. And that was the opposite. So literally like 20% only use mobiles, right? So I think the important thing is to prioritize on the traffic of the business. And then, exactly as Charlene said, what I would then do is I optimize for each situation. So I optimize for desktop first, or it depends on the priority, but desktop. And then for mobile, I would do as little as I can to get that mobile loading as quickly as possible. And also remember, if you use Google Check, which is Google Page Speed, which I think Greg needs to put a link to that uses something called Light Speed, I think it is, or Lighthouse. That's it.
Lighthouse,
Lighthouse.
yeah.
That's it.
It was
And
using Lighthouse.
Lighthouse, yeah, and it works at 3G. So actually, you're testing how the mobile will load on a 3G network. And I think GT Metrics, you can actually do it as well. 3G, 4G, 5G, and that is a really good way to test. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I've actually, go ahead. I'm sorry, Greg.
Oh no, please go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've been using web page tests for a while. I'm starting to. I use GT Metrics every now and again. I don't know if I'm just used to web page tests. I think they've been around the longest. But yeah, I appreciate your answers. I was, a while back, it became really popular to the idea of mobile first design, and I guess the trend, and maybe it's still going that way, and maybe mobile has surpassed desktop and tablet at this point for a lot of sites. But yeah, I just wasn't sure if the mobile first performance was like the way to go. Start with the mobile and have like a performance budget, and then let what happens on mobile kind of dictate what goes on with the rest of the design of the site. I know with Oxygen, I've been using Oxygen and Divi a little bit with WordPress, and it's kind of built for like desktop down. And yeah, I was just thinking through those things. So any comments on that? I appreciate the comments that you've already made. Thanks a lot. I'm Mark, and I'm done.
Because Alex hit it on the head. You wanna still, no matter what it is that you're looking at, you want to know what the overall speed is for each instance, but you still want to focus on how are you getting your audience? How are they coming in? And then you can start tweaking. And you could also, if there's things that you have on the desktop, not everything needs to be on the mobile. So you can also gauge how to really build out the mobile layout and what should you hide and things like that. Or maybe you have things that are mobile only. So you can definitely take that course as well.
Yeah, that's something I'm still trying to figure out with WordPress, how that affects performance and everything. Like if it was just a straight HTML or PHP and all of that. I mean, not PHP, but like JavaScript site, like hiding and removing things. I'm still figuring that out when it comes to WordPress and how well that actually works. Because some of that stuff still loads, it seems sometimes, and it just doesn't appear, but it still takes up resources. So, but yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. I would also add, as far as testing from these different services like Google Page Speed Insights, GT Metrics, another good one is Pingdom, which will give you some data. Oftentimes, it's recommended that you kind of vary up your testing methodology by testing from different locations in the world. And then, of course, in Page Speed with Google, you can test mobile and desktop. And to Alex's point, yeah, it's they're testing mobile at not the fastest possible mobile speed, but more like a 3G speed. And so you can optimize for what your traffic is going to do. But I guess my point was going to be, when I'm testing my sites for speed, I'll get different results every time I click. So I'll do 3 or 5 tests in a row and then kind of throw out the highest and the lowest numbers and take an average. And because you'll find that they give you different results 5 minutes later because of, all the different factors. There's too many variables that it's not always the same. But that's my 2 cents.
Can I just add to that as well? And I'm going to say this statement again from Noah Lerner, who I did actually learn this from. So I'm not saying I invented this or anything like that. I like to always try and give credit to everyone, and I'm always a learner and always beginning. I'm always learning, as I would say. Anyway, what he actually said is the best way to do speed tests, which is now what I do, is if you're using Chrome, click on your profile and open a window as a guest, and then do the speed test. Don't do it when you've got your actual profile open. Do it in a guest, not even a private window. Just do it as a guest. Nothing, no plugins, nothing loaded in it whatsoever, and then do the speed tests. And that is a better, more accurate way of doing it. I'm Alex, and done speaking.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess the only thing with that is that how many people who actually will use your website actually will view it that way. Like most people will have, plugins and things like
Yeah.
that.
But the fact is that it's a bit like saying if you're a musician, I'm putting a studio together not to do music work but to do podcasting. But you get studio monitors, which should be the most accurate sound, which is just natural accurate sound. So if you log in as a guest, right, you're logging in the base way the browser loads, right? If you don't, I've got in my browser, I've probably got 40 plugins, 30 plugins. Yeah. If we're developers, we've got loads of plugins. I mean, I'm not even going to go. I mean, if we went around the room and said how many plugins we've all got, it would be loads. But just doing it as a guest should give you the base number of how long that page loads. That's the comment mainly. I'm actually done speaking.
That makes sense. And then you would know that anybody, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that, Alex. And I haven't gone down that road very far, but I know using the Chrome dev tools that are included, enable you to look at the waterfall in the most detail as well to see what things are loading that you may be able to either get rid of or defer for particular pages. And so I like that idea of cleaning up and using just kind of an empty browser to get, it sort of just gives you a baseline. Mark's right. A lot of people probably do have some plugins in their browsers, maybe not as much as us developers, but just gives you a nice baseline to go by. And really what we're measuring against is ourselves in many cases. We're trying to make a website we're working on load as fast as possible. And every website is unique, right? So what we're really doing is looking at the numbers and then improving them and comparing them to our past tests. And so, going with an empty browser is an idea where you have, you've basically got an empty box, a clean slate to go from, and then try to improve from there.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question about the Cdns. We was talking about. I know I think my platform already comes with CDN, but as far as additional CDNs, is that I know with the cache, I know having two of those doesn't really make sense, but just having more than one CDN, does that make sense?
No, no, you only want one CDN. You want everything to work through one CDN. And I think Cloudflare probably you would say is the industry standard. Does anyone else agree with the Cloudflare thing? But you want one CDN generally.
Yeah,
Okay,
this
that makes
is
sense. But
yeah, Dee, this is Greg. I would agree with that 100%. Oftentimes, you can look at like media or image optimization plugins that you use, like
I think that's what I was kind of getting at. I just found one. It's actually called Search IQ. Um, it's called Search.
Okay.
Yeah, Search IQ. And I didn't know if that made sense. It said it had a plug-in, but it's for the images itself. So I guess and the e-commerce. So and that's
Yeah.
I guess that was the question.
Can I just add something about that with the images? What you want to search for is, as I said to you, we discussed this as an earlier point, but the new format, which is the exciting format, is something called WebP. WordPress on the latest update, which we did, which was 5.8, added WebP as an option that you can now upload images as WebP. But what it doesn't do is take your existing images on the website and convert them to WebP. The one that there is a WebP conversion, I'll get the plugin for you that I've used, and I've converted the site, an e-commerce site, I think with 7,000 images on it, all to WebP, and that improved the site speed massively. So that is what I'd say I'd look for is a WebP, and the caching should be loading the images from cache anyway, or the CDN. So I wouldn't put too many things on. I would have one CDN, decent server caching, and then something to convert all the images on the website to WebP probably would be what I probably would say is good to do. Anyone else agree with that or have any other comments around that?
Yeah, 100%. I would agree, Alex. Everything that you just said makes a lot of sense. And just to kind of wrap up that idea, D, if you're gonna use an image optimization plugin that also offers a CDN for those images, basically that plugin company is taking the expense of hosting your optimized images elsewhere on their own servers and serving them from there around the world. But if you already have a CDN working, on your server, for example, by using Cloudflare as a layer in between your domain DNS and your website itself, and so it's taking traffic and using its own CDN, you'd basically want to turn off the image CDN. You could still use that plugin for optimizing your images, even converting them to WebP or optimizing them as far as compression to smaller file sizes, like Alex was talking about. But you wouldn't want to double up the CDN, just like you wouldn't want to double up caching because it can cause conflicts.
Well, and that becomes, important when you're building your own site and you don't really know what's in each of these tools. You can start having clashes with things because, again, it's a detail that you're not looking for. You don't know. Like I work in Divi, and I can't tell you the number of Divi sites I go in to fix or rescue or redo that have like a header and footer plugin, because you already have it in Divi. And so I see these redundancies because people they don't know. So again, it's just one of those things that comes with experience and seeing enough of them and things like that. um, Another topic I'd love to talk about, because Cloudways and Flywheel and those hosts don't come with email, and so I believe in separating email from hosting. So that's something else that we can talk about, because like Cloudways doesn't have email support. They offer it, but it's not built into the hosting like it is at SiteGround and places like that.
Yeah, I also wanted to piggyback a little bit off of what you were saying, Andrea, about the plugins having a clash. Because what I also had to remember and keep in mind, I have a website that I've been doing since 2004. So as things were evolving with WordPress and they were releasing things to become part of the core, I had to go back and uninstall a lot of the plugins that I needed because WordPress just didn't have that before. So whenever you're doing that, whenever you're building your sites and you're seeing the releases that are coming out, you want to keep an eye on what is it that they're now supporting that you no longer need the plugins for, and start deleting those plugins so you don't have that clash.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's brilliant. And likewise, as we just mentioned, that we now have lazy load images and so forth, and plugins used to do that beforehand. I completely agree with you, totally. And doing that will definitely increase the website. If you want, the best websites are the ones with the least plugins, generally, a lot of the times. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the people talk about, oh, can you have too many plugins, or how many plugins is too many plugins? And then, of course, if they're clashing and trying to do the same thing in a different way, that's when you can have real problems that could cause your website to go down or at least load slower. But it isn't the number of plugins, it's really how those plugins are coded, right? And so, within a plugin, the longevity of that plugin is often tied with whether that plugin is updated and maintained over time. And so really, yeah, it's not the number of plugins, but it's the quality of those plugins. But Charlene's absolutely right. You really should not only deactivate, but just delete completely any plugins that aren't being used, and especially ones that have duplicate functionality elsewhere. Like Andrea talked about with Divi, oftentimes, now with Divi we have global elements like header and footer, and oftentimes, especially as we make websites for clients, clients will potentially go in and be like, ooh, I need a welcome bar for a coupon, a sale I'm doing at the top of my website. I'm going to go and look for a plugin. Ooh, look, here's one. It's called, header bar coupon plugin. And now the way that should be done is to go within Divi in the global header that's already being used and build it there. But oftentimes we find those issues. Very, very true. But I would love to address, well, Alex, do you have a comment on that before I move on?
I just want to say, I think we mentioned this before. Me and Andrew actually talked about it. I think there was another room. I can't remember who it was. We talked about the sites that we've encountered with the most plugins. The one I've actually encountered was, I think, for university that I manage. I think the count was around 65 plugins that they actually had on the website. That was like one of the worst ones I've seen. Anyone else want to comment on that?
I had one that was 110 and it was custom built Divi and it was running on PHP 5 and and it wouldn't let them use the visual builder. So I turned the plugins off 10 at a time. I did a screenshot of all the plugins and I turned them off 10 at a time, like pool testing. And I figured out which one it was, which pool it was in, and then I had to manually go through. But it was one of these sites that it had 10 developers in it over the years she'd had it. And you could see when people didn't know the functionality of the theme, they were just adding things in because that's what they used on other sites. And so it was really a mess. So I pressed the button to update it to the newest Divi and held my breath. It all worked, but it was scary.
Yeah, I think that's the point here. And this one again had loads of other people working on it, and everyone was doing their own special thing, and the thing just gets super messy. So I think just to finish on that note, the best thing you can do is if a site's big or you've had it a long time and it's running slowly, sometimes it's better just to deactivate it or just kind of start again and rebuild it and then just take the content out of it. That will do a major job for speed as well. I also want to touch on something else that was mentioned as well. I know you said that Divi's been updated, but I still think Oxygen is a very, very good fast builder. Definitely also very, very good as well. How are you guys finding the building now in Divi? You said that they've done a major update. Greg, Andrea, how are you finding with that, with speed? But I would also say that I still think native WordPress is still the way that we should be going, because that, Gutenberg and native should be faster because there's nothing else to load. How's Divi for you guys?
Yeah, I've been slowly following all the commentary, and if you've read about it at all, there's been certainly, it's a big, big update. There's like 7 different dynamic loading changes that have happened in the background with the new Divi version at 4.10. And, in the Facebook groups, you could see a lot of people just, clicking update and going, oh my God, it broke my site, and so of course, you basically don't hear when it goes really well. You hear when things are broken more often. But one thing, the most major some of the most major things, I'll just give a quick overview, is that what Divi's done in the background is they basically modularized and broken apart their CSS and their JavaScript that powers the theme and powers your website into these, and it only loads the CSS and the JavaScript that is being used for the front end, meaning it leaves, instead of having a huge CSS file, they basically made the default CSS something from like 800 kilobytes down to 80 kilobytes in a general sense for Divi sites. And that's just one particular thing. They've also addressed a lot of the new modern, like Google and SEO needs, like critical threshold height, deferring JavaScript and things like that. But one thing that's happened is that because Divi is using some caching techniques in the background in order to, minify and combine CSS files and JavaScript files and display them inline instead of loading them at the front, it defers all that loading until after the top of the page has been loaded for the user. However, if you've already got some caching systems in place, the biggest issue has been that when people just update their Divi site and then take a look, there's caching conflicts. And so that comes back to, you only want one cache at a time happening. And so the thing to do is within Divi in the new options, you can turn on and off these about 7 different systems for caching and modularizing the code in the background. And you can turn off each one of those individually and see which one is conflicting and then decide what you want to do. If your server is already minifying your CSS, then you don't need to have Divi do that as well. And that's where some conflicts were coming from. But people are talking about, and people are talking about getting their Divi sites with no design changes from, like in 70s and 80s mobile page speed score in Google PageSpeed Insights up into the 90s to 99 and 100 using just the Divi update. And so it's been a really positive thing. Like we've talked about before, it's great to have those design tools layered on top of WordPress that Divi offers, but oftentimes that does slow down the loading for the user depending on how you use it. And so I know all the page builder companies are working on and aware of these kinds of issues. I'm really happy that Divi has been making strides in this area. But I would agree with Alex. An Oxygen builder has been built for speed and performance from the very beginning and is still one of the fastest for sure. And WordPress core with the Gutenberg block editor, and with a fast theme like Cadence or Astra, something like that, is really the fastest you can get as far as what the user needs to load. And
can I just add to that, as we're talking about speed as well, if that's okay? What I'm now doing is, and I've got my second site I'm actually doing with, so I've rebuilt an entire e-commerce site. Originally, I was using Elementor. I've fallen out of love with Elementor for various reasons, partly because their price increase that they did, I think is disgraceful. But generally, I don't want to be beholden to them. So I switched over to Oxygen, and me and Greg have been talking about Oxygen for quite a while, and we'll have here. But what I'm now doing is a hybrid Oxygen solution. So what I'm now doing is, me as the developer uses Oxygen to develop out the templates for what I'm doing, but the user, meaning the person actually updating the website, only uses Gutenberg. So what I'm doing is I'm building all the templates out in Oxygen, but I'm using Cadence blocks and various blocks to actually build out the page. And I can also use Oxygen to build out blocks to use in Gutenberg. And that means the pages load natively, and all the client has to do is just hit the edit button, nothing else to load. But I can still use Oxygen to build out all the templates. And I'm finding that is, one, good for the client to do updating, and secondly, load speed. Definitely, because it's native. So I'm just saying that I'm actually using Oxygen in combination with Gutenberg. That's the route I'm actually going down. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Can I imply? Okay. So if you guys also, there's another way also to be having the super fast website without any plugins and natively. I created this WordPress with Tailwind and Gulp and with tersers and browser things. So I will share the GitHub on the group, so you guys can check out how if you are into bundle your or minify your CSS or JavaScript yourself, it's definitely helpful to using these bundlers such as Webpack, Gulp, Grunt, and there's several other more that help with your development process. Of course, you can also put your website also run with Gutenberg, or you can have custom field using ACF to just show the field, and your client can fill in, and you show the data in the front page. I'm Sam, I'm done speaking.
Thank you for that, Sam. Yeah, that's great. I think I understood properly that there are some different ways to build things more robustly, but then only allow the client exactly what they need, and you don't let them get into the weeds with, say, opening up the Oxygen builder, for example, or even in Divi. I understand that the Divi builder and the visual builder is easy for me to use, but it has a lot of functionality and it's complex, right? So for some clients, I've done this as well, Ax. You can do it with Divi as well. With the global theme builder, you can use a template for just blog posts, for example, where I've built a design using the Divi tools where it pulls data from each post, and it displays it in a colorful and a designy way that matches the website design. But when the user, when the website owner goes in to create a new blog post or edit a blog post, they're just working with the Gutenberg block editor, and they're not allowed to open up Divi and get all confused and call me on the phone. And so it is important to, also the benefit of that is that the client has ease of use, but it also improves the loading speed on the front end, where everything has been transferred into the block editor, like in your Oxygen example, Alex. I really like that idea.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, I've encountered this, and generally speaking, I don't think Oxygen, I love what it does, Oxygen, and a bit like Divi can be complicated as well. Visual Composer was a complete nightmare. I mean, we're not even going to go down there. I hope no one's using that. If you are, please consider changing from Visual Composer. But the point is, the user just wants to update their content, and I do think that Oxygen is not designed for an end user. Oxygen is definitely designed for a developer. So I think that I've come to the realization that a user or the person doing daily updates on the site should never see the complicated builder, because it's too much for them. And I do think, I'm not saying the actual Gutenberg is perfect. It's still being developed. It's not great, but because I can output from Oxygen to Gutenberg blocks, I can do anything I need to do with it. And therefore, I think we should all be considering the native as the way forward for editors to better edit the website. That's only my thought. I'm sometimes speaking.
Yeah, agreed, Alex. The Gutenberg block editor is getting better and better, and it's approaching all the functionality needs for many projects that originally all the page builders took over that role when WordPress did not include that. And so I think it is important. Go ahead, Samuel.
I think like it's great to use like Oxygen as like a if you are like you as a developer, but one thing that I hated like using Oxygen is like if I update like some content, and if I'm like how could it's like there is like a delay, and also there is like this loading things that I have to like manually reload itself. So I definitely hate that. I think like natively bundler your site, like natively like just coding like manually, like from PHP, like from the scratch, is like way much better in like the as your developer experience. So with like processing, first of all, you can it automatically loaded like the files for you immediately whenever you change it. And the Tailwind have a functionality called just-in-time CSS, so it only load the CSS that you use in that page only, and it's controlled by JavaScript. It's just amazing. I'm sorry, I'm done speaking.
Great. I'm just making some notes there. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I just want to say that I mean, I do agree with you that, Samuel, on certain occasions, bespoke coding and hand coding is great, and I think that everything you just said there. I haven't checked out Tailwind, but I have heard a few people mentioning about it, so I will check that out. And I think it just depends what's needed from the client and what you're basically doing. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, hand coding everything is generally going to be quicker, I think. But Oxygen still is pretty good in terms of I can get a page out pretty quickly in Oxygen. I do agree with you. The only annoying thing about Oxygen is the load speed of loading Oxygen. But I have found that if I load it in Firefox, it does load a lot quicker than if I use than if I try and do it in Chrome. So that's one thing. But I do agree with you. Yeah, obviously hand coding is always going to outwin in terms of developing. So yeah, I'm speaking.
Thank you. And Colleen, hey, welcome to the stage. I know you've been up here for quite a while. I didn't know if you had a particular comment or question. I've seen you blink your mic a little bit, agreeing with one of the topics we were talking about. But are you there, Colleen? Welcome.
I am. Hey, guys, I apologize. I was looking forward to this chat, and I had to rush the kids off to school, so I've been in and out. But I'm at my desk and listening and loving all the valuable information. I actually have a question to pose to the panel, if I may. And if you guys have already covered this when I wasn't here, please tell me to go back to the Discord channel, and I will go through the notes. But wanted to get your thoughts on loading fonts and what is the best way to do that, whether it be using, a font face hosting them on the server, or using Google Fonts or Adobe? What do you guys, what's your MO for font loading?
I prefer to use the Google fonts. Divi comes with them, and I like to use them. I had the issue recently that surprised me. We custom loaded up a font called Cameron Sans, which is fine. You can upload that into your WordPress install, and it's fine. But what happened was this was a translated website, so it had to be in French. Now, when I put the accents on top of the letters of this uploaded font, it made them bold. And it was the weirdest thing because I couldn't see the bolding in the code. It was like this mystery. It was like, why is this E with the accent above it bolded? And it was a font issue. So we actually had to go back to a Google font. We went back to Open Sans, which is my favorite. And that bolding went away with the accent. So again, there's some funny things. I like to stay with what's there. It's fast. You don't have to buy anything. What I found with fonts is clients get really creative in Canva, for instance, and they start using some weird font like Bob's Red River Rock font or something, and then it's not available, if you want to use it on your website. So I find that Canva kind of gets clients confused. So when I work with
100%
in the
agree.
branding side, I try to get them to, like, I try to work with them earlier so they're not using some weird font that I actually can't use on the website. Like, it only can be a graphic. So those are my thoughts about fonts. I like to keep it clean and light and what's sort of there.
I agree, and I recently ran into an issue with loading a font that the client had access to. They had it, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't translating. So I got them to go back to a Google. I don't always like Google because at one point now everything looks the same across all different websites. So if it's a font that it's more for a heading, then I don't mind trying to customize that and upload that. But I tell my clients to first think of your branding. If this is part of something that it's actually a font that you purchased, then yes, let's upload it. Let's make it mainly focused on the headers and stuff like that. Everything else can stay generic, I would say, based off of Google, just to make it easy for other browsers and stuff to pick up, and also keep it maintained. So then they're not worried about updating and purchasing different fonts if they change their mind for whatever reason. So that's what I usually say to them. If they want to make a font different, I ask them if it's something that pertains to their brand in particular, if it's something that they purchased, and then we move forward.
I totally agree with Charlene there. I think like it's just all depending on like the branding, all depending on like the design of the website, If you're like starting from scratch, of course, like it's so much better to like, if you can control the design, how does it look like? I think like if you're using Oxygen or like whatever like builder that you use, you can use like there is like this plugin called Use Any Fonts. It works very well for me. And also like as a designer, you should do like accessibility testing, and like check out like if the font are like available in like the whatever language that like you're using. For example, like if I am like in Vietnam right now and I have a Vietnamese client, then there's some font even in the Google font it doesn't work. So you have to like find a font that like support your languages. So it's all depending on like don't forget like of like the user experience and the user interface.
Can I just add to that, if that's possible as well? I just want to say, Samuel, I think what you touched on is really massively important. Accessibility is massively important, but obviously this topic is meant to be around load speed and page speed. But I completely agree with you there. I'm now test everything. I build all my sites now in dark mode and light mode for dyslexia. I don't use anything less than a pixel font size, and I'm totally with you on full accessibility, which is massively important. I would also say as well, if you want to get slightly creative with fonts, let's not forget as well, if anyone here's got an Adobe account, then Adobe fonts are also pretty extensive as well, and they've got some really nice font pairings as well. And also you can use, there's a font pairing setting also in Google Fonts as well that should give you some font pairings. So I do like to sometimes mix up the headline and then the main font, but I'd just say definitely look for Adobe fonts as well, which was pretty extensive if people want to make things look nice. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
Great.
Thank you guys. That's been great. Sorry, Greg, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. I was going to say thanks, Alex. That's awesome, and all of you guys, great input. I just was going to answer with what I do, and similar to Andrea, using Divi for quite a lot of websites these days, and especially after the speed and performance updates. I like to use Google Fonts. It gives me a lot of font pairing options. There's a lot of options. And even if you have a weird Canva design that you're trying to match, there's often, Google font that can be used. And for everyone in the room, Google Fonts, that enables you as a website designer to use a custom font and load it from the Google's servers and deliver it to the user in their browser, even if they don't have that font loaded into their browser. There are some standard fonts like, Arial Helvetica and, Sans that are just automatically used and would be used as a default if the user couldn't load the font, for example. But I guess my point is, I like to use Google Fonts, and I've just wanted to mention that one of the many Divi speed and performance updates in 4.10 is that they've improved the Google Fonts loading. In fact, you would want to defer the loading of your Google Fonts if you can till after the top of the full content has loaded, because that's another example where you're depending on Google servers to give you that, those fonts and load them fast enough, right? So what Divi's doing is it's enabling caching of the Google Fonts, and it's loading them inline instead of a separate, script in the background. So it reduces the render blocking requests that Google might penalize you for, and it improves the page load times on that. So I tend to rely on Google Fonts because it's easy, but I love that idea of if you need to, like Alex mentioned, looking for Adobe fonts and other font sets that you can load. And Samuel, thanks for mentioning that plugin, Use Any Font. I think that's another good way to go if you're stuck and need to find, a particular font for a design you're trying to accomplish. And so those are my comments. Thanks for that question, Colleen. This is Greg, and I'm done for now.
Thank you, guys. That's been really helpful because I also use Google Fonts and Adobe Fonts, but I try and pick one or the other, so I'm not pulling from multiple sources. But I do have one other kind of follow-up question. I would assume that using Google Fonts, so for example, I have a client that's going to use Railway as one of their fonts on their website. So obviously I can get that through Google Fonts. Just apples to apples, if I were to download Railway, convert it to, a WOFF font file and load it using font family, would that, do you think, be quicker as far as just straight speed optimization, not talking about accessibility or anything else, but just straight speed? Would that be quicker than using the embedded Google code, do you think? Or does anyone have any thoughts? And the reason I'm asking is because I have a similar situation with an Adobe font, and Google is penalizing me for like when I do my page speed test. They're like, "Oh, you're not loading this. It's not this. It's not that. We're docking you." So, would love to hear some thoughts on that if possible.
I would probably say the best thing to do is, the only way to really test it is to run a test and actually do what you were talking about and then test both of them. I would imagine that actually an embedded web font with good caching, and remember server caching also comes into factor here, probably would be quicker because it's loading natively without having to go anywhere to get the data. Samuel, do you have any ideas around that, or anyone else?
Yeah, I think like that's like the part of like the usability testing process, I guess. Like the usability testing or like accessibility testing are like you have to check the contrast, you have to check like if the font like penalized in the both way. You check like you have like a diffusion simulator. You check like in like different like type of like browsers and like a mobile phone. and things like that. I don't have like any kind of like a good way solution to do this, because like if like the font is kind of like generic kind of like font, I would like just use like the Google font. But if like there is something else out there that we want to add, I use the use any font. I'm Sam. I'm done speaking.
Thank you, guys. The usability test, I think, is what it's going to boil down to. And you're right. It's just a matter of, testing both and seeing which one works the best. So I appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and Colleen, just a final thought. I would check specifically why Google is saying that that is a negative in your score as far as the font and loading, the way that you're loading it. Like, what do they want you to do? Do they want you to defer that loading until after the critical stuff is loaded at the top of the page, or what? And then see if you can solve that problem specifically. Of course, if you need to load the font to get the top of the page content looking right, you're going to have to do that. And so, I would look at specifically what Google's saying is the issue and see if you can fix it.
Perfect.
I was just going to say that about how do you not load a font if it's at the top of the page.
Yeah, you may have to, right? And so, of course, you don't want to defer that loading and then have the wrong font load first. Like, what is that, an FOU, flash of unstyled content? You don't want that either, because that's also, it's a very poor user experience, and it also, Google will dock you for that as well. So good stuff.
Thank you, guys. Can I pose I feel like I'm coming so late, so I apologize if any of this is redundant, but can I ask another question, or does anyone else want to jump in with another question? I don't want to dominate here.
Please go ahead. I'm enjoying it. Thanks, Colleen. No, we haven't talked about this stuff yet, so go on.
Awesome. Okay, so my next question is, I know we touched a little bit on images that I had heard. I have just started playing, and I feel a little bit silly copying to this, but I have just started messing with the image source set that WordPress offers now. And I know that that code was already generated if you are using, whether it be the Gutenberg or even the classic editor in previous versions. They would, I think it was as of WordPress 4.4 maybe, they would code that for you when you used it in the content editor. But I am just now starting to use some of that in the themes that I'm working on, and wanted to see if anyone had any thoughts on, because I had previously used background images to do like full width so it would crop properly, because basically I didn't want it to look like narrow and skinny on a phone but perfect on a desktop and vice versa. So has anyone had good success using the image source set in their coding adventures?
Yeah, I actually like have like a good experience using like image source set. I think like I'm not really sure, but like when you're using like how you call it, like a page builder or things like that. But when I code it myself, I just like put like the source sets, for example, like for like 200 pixels or 400 pixels, and also like depending, like there's like also like a CSS as well for it, like there's like CSS like object fit cover as well, like like let like the image to how like fit within like the like the diff that you are in, like that you put. So it's yeah, anyway, I'm done.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm just starting to play around with it, and I'm not, I only understand broad strokes of it, to be honest. Of the browser then loads when using the image source set, the browser will load the appropriate sized image, because of course WordPress makes all of those beautiful thumbnails automatically when you upload an image. So I've just started using it for like if I have thumbnails or featured images that are on the homepage, and just wanted to see if anyone else was using it for in their theme development and things like that, because I think it would be a I would imagine it's going to be more optimized to use an image tag than it would be to do a background image with a cover and, doing what Samuel had mentioned of doing an image tag with an object fit cover would be more optimized than a background image, I would think.
Yeah, Colleen, this is certainly a topic we could go deep into the weeds on, I think. I'll confess that, I haven't learned about or played with this very much. I'll often rely on my theme and on WordPress to do what it does, right? But, just for everyone in the room, source set, the source set attribute, SRCSET, is basically a way to display the correctly sized image depending on the user's browser. So, right, it's all about responsive images and responsive design. And so as far as site speed and performance, I think that we're on the right track going in that direction as far as showing the right image for the right user. Of course, you don't want to show a 1,000 pixel image when someone's looking on their phone and the largest they would see is 300 pixels wide, right? So using that and having it be included by default in WordPress, very important. I don't have any deep insights or strategies, and I haven't played with it too much myself, but I just want to get in here and define that for the room before we move on. Thank you for that, Colleen.
I just want to say I have actually, now you come to it, because I have actually used that, and I've used it with a background image in the hero area, just for anyone who doesn't really know, hero being the top of the page. So I have actually used that feature. Actually, what's that? You're talking about actually having the image in the page. Yeah. In the background images, I now optimize all my background images for the hero area to load on mobile, to load a different hero image, because exactly as you just said, they're two different ratios. So I've managed to save speed, and I have actually used the actual image attribute actually being the actual image in the page. I have actually used that now as a feature as well. So I have actually tried it and played out with it. It's a great feature to be able to use, definitely. And I think we should be optimizing images for different devices. I think it's something that everyone should be doing. But I think the hero area is the big one, because that's the big, image when someone looks at the site and you've got maybe some text over the top of it. I think that's the biggest one to actually optimize and have a different one for mobile, for me personally. I'm Alex, I'm done speaking.
I'm curious because in Divi, Greg, as I recall, you can't give an attribute to a background image. And so I try not to use background images if I want an attribute to be attributed, or if for accessibility, it won't show up with an alt tag if someone's trying to read it, because you can't in Divi attach that to a background image. So
yeah, that's interesting.
You can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that. But I think what you can, for accessibility, I wouldn't do an alt tag on a background image. But what you could do for accessibility, if it's very, very important, is you could do something with the title tag and put you could put another attribute on a div tag or on a container tag and say something about it. Or there's another way you could do it, basically. But I think that I still like on a hero image, the image in the background with text over the top of it. But I think I'd make the title more descriptive, or use an alt tag. Or the other option you actually could do, sorry, and I'm babbling a bit. The other way you can actually do it is you could load a spacer GIF, which I know is a really old thing, right? It's a spacer GIF where you can do a PNG, which is a 1 by 1 pixel PNG, and in there you could put in an alt title tag for accessibility if you were still using a background image. That could be another way to do it.
So what I do rather than background images is I load an image and use absolute positioning for the text on top. So in Divi, you can do absolute and relative positioning. So I very rarely use a background image anymore, and I use an image module, and then I absolute position text on top if I want like a module on top of that image, because then you can have the alt tag. But yeah, it was just interesting that you can't do that on a background image easily.
The div, I want to add, like Andrea would say, also like the div on the top of that image, the absolute top, absolute CSS have to be like relative, so it stays around that like div that you put.
Yeah, that would be really important. Yeah, I mean, I still personally use background images, and if I wanted to make it descriptive, I would do the same thing by putting just a blank image in and then putting all the description on that, and that way I know the background will be correctly responsive how I want it to work. But I mean, each their own. As long as it works, that it's accessible, responsive, and also loads quickly for desktop and mobile users. That's what we're looking to achieve. So there's more than one way to do it, I think. I'm Alex done speaking.
Yeah, because for Elementor, I use spacers on top of in the areas where the background would be, so it kind of helps that out too. And I just size out the area, so wherever the photo is, I make sure that the focus of the photo, especially for the mobile, is seen properly. So I just adjust it. It just allows us to adjust it a little quicker.
I just want to say, guys, it's been fantastic with the room. I'm going to head out because I'm actually going out this evening. So I want to thank Greg for running the room and for everyone here. It's been really amazing. I learned loads and I love modding with all of you guys. I hope we can always mod in the future. And I'm also really congratulations for Greg for also recording the session as well as the first recorded Clubhouse session. So I want to thank everybody, but I'm going to be heading out if that's okay. It's been great to see everybody, and thank you so much, all of you.
Thanks so much for being here, Alex. Yes, and I mean, we've been going for 2 hours. It's almost the top of the hour, and I had been waiting for my moment to mention that we're going to be landing the plane here soon, wrapping up the room. I know that we've had a great discussion about speed and performance for WordPress. And of course, there's much more we could discuss. We could probably go all day on this topic. But Andrea, I do appreciate you bringing up, we did not discuss it, but bringing up, hosting email separate from your website is something really important for speed and performance. And I'll just let everyone know there's, a new Leverage WordPress YouTube channel that I've just created. And that is exactly one of the topics I'm addressing in my first video series there at Leverage WordPress on YouTube. So I appreciate you guys coming to the Clubhouse room today. Everyone in the room, Monique and Carlos, I see you. Alexandra, Henry, thanks for being here. All the mods and Mark up here on the stage, I appreciate you guys being here. I'd love for you guys to offer up any final comments on any topics we've discussed today, and we'll wrap it up in the next few minutes.
Thank you again for hosting the room.
You're welcome, and we'll see. I hope that my recording has come through and I was able to record everyone on stage in addition to my own voice. We'll see if I was able to technologically accomplish that. If so, I'll be placing the recording and a copy of the notes over at leveragewp.co. The new website to support this brand and the club. Also, don't forget that we have a Discord channel at wphqchat.com forwards to the Discord channel, and I've been taking notes there, which I'll also post a copy of at leveragewp.co. I appreciate Alex for putting that together and connecting us with the Discord channel here, along with the other moderators in Discord that contribute there. Everyone in the room here and on stage, welcome to join there, where we exchange some written info and links, etc., and the schedule for our Clubhouse rooms. So thanks, everyone. I think I love seeing everyone and talking about WordPress, and we'll be back again, I'm sure. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, guys.
That's great. Thanks a lot. It's been a great room. See you guys
thank
later.
you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samuel. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here, Charlene, Alex, and we'll see you guys next time. I'm just going to give it a minute or two, or more like 10 seconds, and close the room. See you guys next time.